The award-winning biographer Doris Kearns Goodwin tells a story of her time with Lyndon B. Johnson. She first met Johnson as a young White House intern, and she worked with his staff and got to know him. And when he left the White House, he tapped her and said, "I want you to come down with me to Texas. I want you to help me write my memoirs. I want you to write a biography about me." And she was just flattered and so excited to have this opportunity. And they spent lots and lots of time together at his ranch down in Texas. Now, LBJ had a reputation for being a little bit of a womanizer, and Doris Kearns Goodwin was always a little apprehensive that maybe someday he might put a move on her and try to seduce her. Well, one day they went out to this particularly beautiful spot in Texas on his ranch, and they were having like a picnic, and he was kind of leaned over on one elbow, and she was there, and she was asking him questions and taking notes, and she was just in the biographer zone, right? She was just, asking him all these questions, and all of a sudden he got this strange look over his face. He said, "I need to tell you something." And like warning bells went off in her head. She was like, "Uh-oh, what do I do? How do I say no? How do I get out of here? What's gonna happen?" And he said, "You know what? You're a very special lady." And she's like, "Ah." And he said, I just want to let you know that you really remind me of my mother." And then they went back to their conversation. And she was like, "Well, that felt like a compliment, but it also kind of hurt because he didn't want to seduce me because I reminded him of his mother." And so she was glad that she didn't have this really awkward interaction with the former president where she'd have to say no. But I don't know what kind of a compliment it is if a person tells you, "You remind him a lot like his mother." Well, anyway, their relationship was great, and she was able to really get into the head of LBJ. And one of the things she says about him is he's just this fascinating person of paradoxes and dichotomies. He was famous for his marriage with Lady Bird, but he had tons of affairs. He was this imposing 6'4" person who was just a physical presence, but he was a chain smoker and almost died of a heart attack. He started out as a school teacher, and he would teach 5th, 6th, and 7th grade. He coached the boys' baseball team, and he was the janitor after school. And then he becomes a person who is the Senate Majority Leader, Vice President, President, House of Representatives. Like, he served in so many different areas. He was rejected by the Kennedy clan. They made fun of his accent, and they didn't let him know anything about their decisions. And when JFK died and all of a sudden LBJ's in charge, like, he has the opportunity to just clean house and get rid of all of the Kennedy men. But he said, "Nope, for the rest of Kennedy's term, I'm going to keep his cabinet. I'm going to keep his staff. I'm going to work with his brother, Robert Kennedy, even though he hates me. I'm going to do this." And that hampered a lot of what he wanted to do as president. So he's full of all of these contradictions. He's famous for being the president who pushed tons of civil rights into action. But for the majority of his career, the first 20 years, he voted against every single civil rights bill. So he's this very, very complex person. And it's so easy for us to look at him and make snap judgments. We can look at him and say, he was a terrible person because he had an affair, or multiple affairs. There's conspiracies surrounding him and the assassination. People look at the way he handled the Vietnam conflict, or people look at his later record of the Civil Rights Act and how he was able to help make America a better place for so many minorities. Or they look at his successful record. He was able to pass so many things through Congress. He's one of our most successful presidents if you look at bills that he wanted to get passed. He didn't have to fall back on executive orders. He knew how to work the system, and he would cajole and goad and bribe and intimidate and manipulate and do whatever it took to get what he thought needed to pass passed. And so even there, you're looking at a person who would intimidate guys, and he would stand up really big, and he'd get right in their face, just inches from their face, and he would just overwhelm people with his physical presence. but then he was doing it to pass a bill that would help millions of people. So he's such a hard person to really nail down. And isn't that true about everyone? I mean, I'm out here on Hayden Lake and we're, just wrapping up a family vacation and we're hanging out with aunts and uncles and cousins and now the next generation of cousins. And it's so interesting being an adult and seeing all of these family members as rounded individuals. When you're a kid, you just see people and they're either good or they're bad, or they're funny, or they're kind, or they're smart, or they're lonely, or whatever it is. But then once you become an adult and you really get to see people, you see the depth. You start to hear the backstory and you understand, well, this is why someone acts this way, or I never knew that they were enjoying this, and it's just so interesting how deep human beings are. The greatest marriages ever, the people in those marriages, they never get bored with each other. They're constantly learning and growing and discovering more about each other. There's a Bible verse where it says, God put eternity into the hearts of man. And I think that's why even when atheists die, people are sad. It feels like it's wrong, like somehow we should live forever. And it's because that's built into us. And a part of eternity that's built into us is we have this infinite capacity to grow and change. And while you can read a wiki article on LBJ and make a decision on his character and decide he was a bad president, or he was a good president, or he was a bad man, or he was a good man, you'll never really know the true Lyndon Baines Johnson. And I think that's a big reason why Jesus tells us not to judge, lest we be judged. He says, you know what? Take the plank out of your eye before you try to get the speck out of your brother's eye. And there's a lot of people who think, oh, I've got all the planks out of my eyes. Now I'm going to go fix the world. And it's just, if that's your attitude, you probably got a plank in your eye you don't know about. And that's why it's so important to, in humility, come to Jesus every morning and have that renewing of your conversion and say, hey, Jesus, I'm here today. What do you want to take out of my life? What do you want to put in? Who do you want me to love? How can I serve you today? And when we have that kind of attitude, we'll be able to see the good in people like Lyndon B. Johnson. And we'll be able to stand up against evil actions that maybe someone powerful might have. You see, God is so good, and He is never done with any of us. As long as we're willing to work with Him, He will continue to work with us. And so today, as we wrap up with Lyndon B. Johnson, just want to encourage you and remind you to let go of the judgment and the criticism. Because everyone, you and me included, there is a lot to criticize. But if we let go of the criticism and we take Paul's advice, and he said, encourage one another, build each other up. Jesus judged all of humanity as worthy enough to die for. And he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commands. You'll love one another the way I have loved you. And so maybe we should start judging people around us. But instead of judging them as not worthy, we should judge them as totally worthy of our love and of our service, of our gratitude, of our compassion. And if we can get that attitude, you know what? The world's going to be a better place. God bless.